Nature of Society, Part 2, Session 1. Welcome back to our great study of the nature of society. It is so good to see you all back. This term we are going to be a bit more thorough in our study, and we will begin by looking at a number of terms used in the subject of economics which are pertinent to our endeavor. We shall be looking at terms such as land, labor, capital, wealth, human desires, rent, wages, and interest. It is important that these terms be looked at closely and that precise definitions be made of each of it if we are to proceed with greater understanding in our study of the nature of society. We begin with the term land. In economic terms, land is all the natural resources, including minerals, the wild beasts and birds which live upon the earth, and all other such resources exterior to man himself. Man takes no part in the production of this resource, as it is all of the Creator's making. Man may certainly discover new possibilities for its use, but he cannot add an ounce of weight to it. Certain areas of this resource land are of better use to man than other areas, and the man who controls such a valued piece will have a profound influence over the community. This natural resource land is our first factor. We next come to human desires. Man finds himself having to satisfy desires. Without man's access and work on land, there can be no possibility of him satisfying his natural desires. The earth and its riches will not maintain human beings unless they work. Man's progress and the degree to which he can satisfy all his desires depend on the direction he gives to his activities, the skill, knowledge, and the energy he expends. We will next come to labor, another economic factor and term that we will use in our study. Man's primary desire among all other subordinate desires is to live. Man cannot live unless he labors. By the sweat of thy brow thou shalt eat bread. After satisfying his primary desire for food, he then seeks to satisfy his desire for shelter, clothing, and all the other subordinate desires coming after. He needs to apply energy, skill, and knowledge to the natural resources around him. This work must be continuous. If he stops working, even for a very short time, his very existence becomes endangered. It is this constant work that man has applied over the many millennia that has resulted in our man-made world today. However cynical we may view it, it still provides us with so much when compared to the output that we individually provide. Labor we define as all human effort, past and present, which either makes the thing or do the things that gratify human desire. These are from the very menial operations to the very intricate. Land, human desire, and labor are the three primary economic factors in society. On them, all other factors depend. Man is utterly dependent on land, human desire, and labor, but of the three, land comes first. Labor could not produce anything without land, but land in no way is dependent on labor. The Creator is the one responsible for its existence, so that land comes first. Human desires then requires the application of labor to this land. This truth is universal and cannot be gainsaid. The next factor under consideration is wealth. Wealth is defined as the land modified by labor so as to fit it for the gratification of human desires. The many things that man can fashion from the earth by his skill, knowledge, and effort is truly wonderful. That this wealth reaches the hands of only a fraction of the world population is man's greatest dilemma and challenge. This wealth needs to be constantly produced and maintained, or else it falls into decay. The infinite storehouse that land is constantly providing the natural resource for the production of this wealth. And despite the fears that these resources are running out, the stock is being continuously replenished. The abundance of wealth, which seems to be evident in the world today, is small in comparison to the potential amount if all valuable lands were accessible or were producing optimally. Contrary to what the current opinion is, land is not wealth. Wealth has to be produced, and it must satisfy desire. When financial institutions use land as wealth collateral, this is one of the main reasons that industrial recessions and depressions result. A lot of wealth is used up to acquire the site in the transaction before any production of wealth could take place. When the price or lease of land becomes too high, then businesses cannot thrive, with the consequent effect of business failure, loss of jobs, and failure of the financial system. To be clear, land is not wealth, for this has to be produced on it. Skill and knowledge is not an asset, for these have to be put to use on land before any wealth is produced. Money, mortgages, bonds, etc. are similarly not wealth, if the wealth is not produced to back them. We will pause now, and when we return, we will consider the terms capital, rent, wages, and interest. So we will take a short break now. And in this short break, I want to introduce you to my publication that I did in 2015, which is a work on the country that I live in, Trinidad and Tobago. It's entitled On Development: Innovative Solutions for the Development Dilemma Facing Trinidad and Tobago. And this literary work is noted for its simplicity and profundity, as it is for its audacious prescriptions for the economic development of any economy. And this is an excerpt of a review from one of the economic scholars in my country, who I will just name as David P. The book first looks at the history of the economy of Trinidad and Tobago since the Second World War and catalogues the country's cycles of boom and bust since then. The country is heavily dependent on oil and natural gas for its economic fortunes, and the economic cycles over the years have generally been as a result of the fluctuations of the international price levels of oil and natural gas. Of course, Trinidad and Tobago is just off the coast of Venezuela, the northeastern coast, and similar to the economy of Venezuela, which is based on oil and natural gas, we have similar economic fortunes based on the economic cycles. The book puts forward a specific prescription that has been espoused by the great economic philosophers, of which modern-day economic thought and policy have largely ignored. This specific prescription that will bring the economy into balance can treat with the following problems confronting Trinidad and Tobago, or any other country for that matter. The burgeoning unemployment and underemployment problem, which sees many young persons who are well educated not having access to gainful full-time employment and having to migrate to other places. The perennial housing shortage that sees as many as 1/5 of the country's inhabitants seeking out more affordable and acceptable housing, and the state seemingly unable to treat with this issue. The poverty rate, which has stubbornly stuck at 20% of the country's population, despite a burgeoning social security sector. The unmanageable crime rate, which sees the country rated as the 10th most homicidal in the world per capita. The prospects for the economic fortunes of the country as a result of the vagaries of the global oil and gas markets, and the viable alternatives. the general lack of productivity and lack of creativity in wealth production in the country, and much, much more. The book will tune the average reader into, in a simple way, with what the past great economic thinkers have prescribed, much of which is absent today, and will give fresh insights and real possibilities not only for Trinidad and Tobago but the world. For those of us wanting a fresh look at the subject of economic development, this is a must read. So you can get this book at Amazon.com. You can just punch in the author's name or Nigel Gittins or the name on development, and you will certainly come upon the book. So we come to the second half. Not all wealth is made so that it may gratify human desire. There are some forms of wealth that are used to produce more wealth, which can satisfy human desires. An example of this is the use of machines, factory shells, or any such intermediate devices that are used for final production of wealth items. This form of wealth performs an economic function. The distinction between wealth as capital or wealth for the satisfaction of human desire is rarely the use to which the wealth is put. A vehicle such as a car could be used for pleasure, in which case it would be wealth, or could be used to conduct company business, in which case it would be capital. There is a fallacy which is quite universal, which states that land is capital. Land and labor are used to produce capital, which when labor is again applied produces wealth. Like all forms of wealth, capital must continuously be replenished and replaced for the production of wealth to continue. Similarly, money or stocks and shares are not capital. For these to have any value, they must be backed by wealth. We must make the point that the production of wealth is usually in a multi-processed activity. At each stage of the activity, the value of wealth created is increased. The consumer is the final recipient of the wealth created. In this multi-processed activity, there are those who control the land, those who control labor, and those who control capital. We now introduce the concepts of rent, wages, and interest. Rent is that share of value which a man is able to obtain through his control of land. Wages is that share of value which a man is able to obtain through his control of labor, of his own labor. And interest is that share of value which a man is able to command through his control of wealth. A full discussion of this will be had in a future session. Before we close this evening's session, we will look at what Henry George, a well-known 19th century social and economic philosopher, had to say about the terms land, labor, capital, and wealth. With respect to land, he said, "The term land in political economy means the natural or passive element in production and includes the whole external world accessible to man, with all its powers, qualities, and products, except perhaps those portions of it which are for the time included in the man's body or in his products, and which therefore temporarily belong to the categories, man and wealth, passing again in their reabsorption by nature into the category land." This is taken from Henry George, Science of Political Economy, the statement. With respect to labor, he said, "The term labor includes all human exertion in production of wealth, whatever its mode. In common parlance, I often speak of brain power and land labor as though they were entirely distinct kinds or exertions, and labor is often spoken of as though it involved only muscular exertion. But in reality, any form of labor, that is to say, any form of human exertion in the production of wealth above that which cattle may be applied to doing, requires the human brain as truly as the human land, and would be impossible without the exercise of mental faculties on the part of the laborer. Labor, in fact, is only physical in external form. In its origin, it is mental, or on strict analysis, spiritual. This again is taken from Henry George, Science of Political Economy. Capital, which is not in itself a distinguishable element, but which it must always be kept in mind, consists of wealth applied to the aid of labor in further production, is not a primary factor. There can be production without it, and there must have been production without it, or it could not in the first place have appeared. It is a secondary and compound factor, coming after and resulting from the union of labor and land in the production of wealth. It is in essence labor raised by a second union with land to a third or higher power, but it is to civilized life so necessary and important as to be rightfully accorded in political economy the place of a third factor of production. Henry George, Science of Political Economy. Here's what he had to say about wealth. Wealth is not the sole object of labor, for labor is also expended in ministering directly to desire, but it is the object and result of what we call productive labor. That is, labor which gives value to material things. Nothing which nature supplies to man without his labor is wealth, nor yet does the expenditure of labor result in wealth unless there is a tangible product which has and retains the power of ministering to desire. Henry George, Progress and Poverty. Next week, we will examine the issue as to whether poverty is inevitable. Before we end, I would like again to let your attendees know that Unsustainable Development is an educational offering devoted to the dissemination of its course to all of mankind and to those who have the English language as their official language in the first instance, and to all eventually all over the world. To make this possible, and because we do not charge a fee for this dissemination, we rely wholeheartedly on monetary donations to meet the cost of achieving these goals. If you have found these sessions useful thus far and would like others to have access to them, we would gratefully accept your donations should you be inclined to offer them. You can send donations to our PayPal account at the email address notebroker2001@yahoo.com. Thank you for your kind gesture. As indicated before, you can communicate with us by going to our Facebook page on Sustainable Development or our YouTube channel, Balancing the Economy. We will respond to all your comments or questions. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the alert button to get notices that our latest session has been posted. All sessions are archived in the video library, video section of our Facebook page. Please share with your family, friends, and acquaintances.